Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to all our viewers and attendees joining us today on our YouTube channel. I'm Farheen Zubair, the project manager for this extraordinary event, and I am truly thrilled to have you here with us. Today is a special day as we bring together two incredible advocates who are making a profound impact in the realm of disability research and advocacy. We have the honor of hosting Advocate Rizwanul Huda from the Disability Research Center, alongside his esteemed colleague, Advocate Chiara Sweeney. Without further ado, let's embark on this inspiring journey together, as we delve into the world of disability research and advocacy. Advocate Huda and Advocate Sweeney, we're grateful to have you, and we can't wait to hear your insights. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for a thought-provoking and engaging discussion. Thank you for being a part of this event.
Thank you everyone for coming. Today's event, we are featuring a very special guest speaker, attorney-in-law, Mr. Rizwanul Huda, and attorney, Chiara Sweeney. Am I pronouncing that right? Chiara Sweeney. I'm Farheen Zubair, your Allied Project Manager, and today we have virtually with us our director, Sandra, as well as Mona Minkara, who's our director of the Allied. Please let me know if you need any additional accommodations or assistance during our event today by messaging me virtually via Zoom or letting me know in person. We also have an interpreter and we also have interpreter Valerie with us today. So yes, please grab some bubble tea or some samosas and let's begin with our event. Mr. Rizwanul Huda, it's a great honor to have you today to speak at our second event of the semester. Let me tell a few things about Rizwanul. Rizwanul joined Disability Law Center as a staff attorney in 2021. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Prior to joining, he was a solo practitioner who advocated for employees and immigrants. He was a member of CPCS Children and Family Law Trial. He has represented clients in the Appeals Court, Superior Court, Boston Municipal Court, and many more. He earned an MBA and was a successful financial professional in his previous career. He transitioned to become an attorney to protect the civil rights of the marginalized population. The Massachusetts Community Commissions Against Discrimination awarded him the prestigious Napolitano Fellowship. Welcome, Mr. Huda. Today, we also have here with us Ms. Chiara, who joined DLC in September 2022. Am I right?
Yes.
She's originally from California. She graduated from Boston University, as she was telling me right now. Chiara worked for 3 years as a web accessibility specialist. During law school, Chiara participated in civil litigation and justice clinic. Welcome, Chiara.
Thank you.
So today, Rizwan is here to discuss the federal and state law that protect the rights of people with disabilities and get an insight on the cases where DLC has helped clients to get accommodation, so they have equal access in workplace, in public, and housing. So Rizwanul Huda, you have the floor. You can start with your discussion.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for your introduction. Let me get to the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, so hopefully you can see that, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So basically, we're going to talk about the law that protects people with disabilities. There's federal law, there's state law. And then we're not going to talk too much about that, but just to make sure people know that they have certain protections in the law and what their rights are. And we're going to try to spend more time with actual cases and how they made an impact on people, how they were able to empower themselves using reasonable accommodations requests. And we also like to have this to be more of an interactive dialogue. So if people have questions, just put in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions as I go and just kind of play it by ear. But, I definitely would like to be this more interactive kind of dialogue. So, when I think about empowerment, let me just do something on my screen. Okay. So when I think about empowerment, I think about a couple of things that you need to know. One is knowledge of your rights, because you can't empower yourself if you don't actually have any knowledge. And you should know it's illegal to discriminate against people with disabilities. And so once you have that knowledge, you can actually start self-advocating for yourself, right? And that includes being using your voice and telling people that you need certain things differently because of your disability. We call that accommodations, and I'll get to that. And you may say it in, verbally, or you may need to put it in writing. And also to be persistent, because if you're persistent, that will basically empower you to make a change that will really help your life in getting whatever it is you're trying to do. And if you hit a wall, you can always try to get some advocacy from third party, like nonprofits like the Disability Law Center or your allies. And there's tons of organizations that advocate for people with different kinds of disability, whether you're deaf or blind. There's also the American Civil Rights, ACLU, Civil Liberties Union, and a bunch of other nonprofits that advocate for marginalized people, GBLS as well. So, but it starts with the knowledge of the law, what your rights are, and then you having the voice to stand up and to do that, the courage to do that. So, in terms of federal law, the big law that we're going to talk about is the Americans with Disability Act. Now, there are 5 titles on this, and we're not going to go through each one because you can do a presentation on each one. But just so people know, the first one is employment, and that's a big one where if you're working somewhere, your employer cannot discriminate against you because you have a disability, and you may need, in order to do your job, you may need to do it differently. And so as long as you can do your job either with or without accommodations, you can do the essential functions of the job. Your employer cannot discriminate against you. So this applies to the workplace. It also applies to state and local government. We're talking about like agencies of the government as well. You see Title II cases. Title III cases is public accommodations. That applies to anything where you see public transactions going on, like a university. It might apply to a hospital where you have a disability and you need to do have them change a certain policy. It might even be like a visitor policy or whatever the case is. And Title IV and V is telecommunications and miscellaneous, which we're really not going to talk about. There's also the Fair Housing Amendments Act. This is important because the amendments were passed to protect those with disabilities and families. And so if you live in a house and you need you live in like a housing authority, or you have a apartment building, and you need a particular kind of disability, and a common one would be like a grab bar, if you need a grab bar or something like that. And we're going to talk about certain cases like that. Your property manager, your landlord needs to work with you to put those in. But just so you know, if you're renting an apartment, you can definitely ask your landlord for accommodations if you have a disability and you're getting a hard time getting around, because you have the right to have equal enjoyment of the bathroom as well as the people without disabilities. That includes the balcony, that includes the common areas, whatever the case is. It might be the male area where if you're in a wheelchair and the male is a little too high or something like that. So the next one is anti-discrimination state laws in Massachusetts, and my colleague Kira is going to talk about that.
Yeah, so I am happy to be here with everyone, and I am going to tell you a little bit about the state laws in Massachusetts, which give us a little bit more protection than the federal laws in some ways. So there's the Massachusetts General Laws, Section 151B, and that covers employment. That's kind of the parallel to Title I of the ADA, which covers employment. However, Section 151B is useful because it covers more types of private employers, like some private employers that are not covered under Title I would be covered under 151B. And also 151B covers certain medical conditions that might not be covered under Title I. And the other state law would be the Public Accommodations Law, which is the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 272. You don't have to remember that. There's no quiz. But Section 98 is the Public Accommodations Law that states that people with disabilities are entitled to the equal enjoyment of public accommodations in the same way that people without disabilities have. And public accommodations, as Riz was explaining, it's basically any place that's open to the public. So hospital, a daycare center, a gym, hair salon, that kind of thing. Any place like that cannot discriminate against a person with a disability. And discrimination can really mean, and this applies to all of these laws, discrimination can mean treating someone differently because of their disability, or it can also mean refusing to make an accommodation or a reasonable modification so that the person with a disability can access the public accommodation. And this law is, as you might have guessed, this is a parallel to Title III of the ADA. However, what's useful about Section 272 is that it can provide for monetary punitive damages if someone violates that law, where Title III would not. And I also want to point out that there are a couple of specific sections of 272 that might be of interest. Section 98A prohibits public accommodations from refusing entry to a dog guide. Very relevant to many people that I know. And also Section 92A prohibits public accommodations from posting signage that would be discriminatory to a person with a disability. For example, like signs saying that you must be fully able-bodied to go on this ride or something like that. That would be considered discriminatory. So I'll turn it back over to Riz.
Yeah, and that was a really good point that you brought up about Title III, how you don't get monetary damages, but you do on 272-98. So we'll get to kind of like remedies in the, but later on. But that was a really good point, Kira. Well, let's see. Yeah. So when we talk about reasonable accommodations, if someone has a disability, they can ask for a change or adjustment to a policy or an environment. So you can think of this in different kind of environments of what a reasonable accommodation is. And it's your right as a person with a disability to request accommodation at your workplace and a job. It's also your right to request accommodation like in a university setting. If you need, say, more time on a test because it's related to your disability. It's also your right to request an accommodation in a housing situation as well. So you can request an accommodation in these different environments. And basically, it's a change or adjustment in the policy. And an example that I would give that's really simple is, you might see a lot of signs when you walk into a store saying no pets. Well, that's fine, but I can still bring my service animal into the store because that's a reasonable accommodation. It's a change to your policy. So whatever the policy is, what you're asking for is them to adjust that policy because of your disability. And you got to remember that whatever the accommodation you're requesting, it really needs to be connected to your disability. And you have to show that in your request. A resource that's really good here is this askjan.org. It's really good because if you need to do a particular kind of task at work or you have a particular disability, they actually, it's very detailed on like the kind of devices that can help you or other things. There's a phone number you can call. It's a great resource. They have a lot of information about the ADA. So if you're someone that's requesting accommodations, I would definitely do my homework before you actually ask your boss or whoever it is you're asking. And also the second website here, the EEOC website, is really a good website because the EEOC is the state, is a federal agency that enforces the ADA, whereas a state agency that enforces these anti-discrimination laws would be the MCAD, or the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. The EEOC is now, we're talking about the federal entity. They put in a very detailed website with a lot of different examples on what accommodations would be appropriate and what accommodations would not. And it's really good to look at that and see if any of those are relevant to your situation. I should let you know that just because you ask for an accommodation based on your disability doesn't mean that your employer or your the place of public public accommodations or your housing, your property manager has to give it to you. But that is they have a couple of defenses, which is they don't have to give it to you, and that's only if there's something called an undue hardship, and also if they have something of like a safety risk. And I don't really want to get too much into it, but you should just know that those are basically the two things where they can deny the accommodations. And moving along, I want to talk a little bit more about empowerment and maybe share my personal story as well. You know, when I think about empowerment in the beginning, I was talking about that you really have to have the knowledge and you have to really persist with and making sure that just because the law is on your side, there are so many cases where people are not actually following the law, and you have to persist and show them and explain to them that yeah, you really do need to do this because you're violating the law. So in my personal story, I have ADHD. I also have dyslexia. I wasn't actually diagnosed with any of this stuff until my 40s. And that's when I went to law school. And so when I took my bar exam, I never, well, actually, I'll back up to my LSATs. You have to take the LSATs in order to get to law school. You know, when I took the LSATs, I never really finished it because of time, given my disability, I couldn't finish it in time. But I didn't actually realize that because I was still getting diagnosed for my situation. And I lacked knowledge that because of my disability, I can actually ask for more time to finish that test. Obviously, I would need some kind of doctor's note, which we call medical support. But I had all that. And but I just didn't know that. And anyway, so that's a situation where I didn't really empower myself because I really lacked the knowledge of what my rights were. But when I got to law school, I asked for accommodations. I asked for more time on tests, and they did grant that to me without any issues. And that was just plain knowledge of knowing the law. And then when it was time for me to take the bar exam 3 years later, they didn't grant it to me. And it's only because I persisted. And I said, no, you really actually do need to give me these accommodations, that they gave me the more time, the additional time that I needed to complete the bar exam. So, you know, it really has to do with me. Sometimes it's just talking to folks and explaining that this is what they're supposed to do, so, or just asking for it. And sometimes it's just being persistent. Moving along, I want to share some cases with you. And this is a case of a client who's paraplegic. I think I moved it too quickly, sorry. And he uses a wheelchair to ambulate. He can't use, you know, he's basically paralyzed from the waist down. And he can't get into his bathtub because he's paralyzed from the waist down. And he depends on his PCAs for sponge baths. And he's been doing this for 5 years. He had requested a roll, what they call a roll and shower, where you can roll your wheelchair right into it and sit on in a kind of chair and have like a real shower. He hasn't had that in 5 years when I got this case. And he had a social worker, and basically the property manager rejected his request for this roll and shower, basically because it cost $20,000, which they were gonna basically claim undue hardship. And when I first got this case, I was ready to dig in for a battle because I didn't think they were going to come around. I didn't think that the negotiations was going to work, and which is really shame on me because but because of the persistence, I was able to negotiate with the property manager that this was a legal responsibility, and they agreed basically within a month to install a roll-in shower and pay for it. And I also put him in touch with the social worker who was trying to help them get some kind of partial reimbursement through Mass Health. And whether they got that or not, I don't really know. So let me, this is the picture of the inaccessible shower. You can see the bathtub right there, right? How are you supposed to get into that if you're paralyzed? You know, his PCAs really couldn't pick him up and put him in there like that. And I want to show you a video of his roll-in shower that somebody made for me. Yep, I'm sorry. Come on. So we're okay. So you can, if you look at the floor, you'll see there's just like a little things so the water doesn't go all over the place. But basically, and that's his chair where he can take a shower now. And you know, he hasn't had a shower in 5 years, basically. But then the tub is gone. Yeah. So this has made a huge for this one client. This was a huge difference in his life, just to be able to take a shower. We had another case where an employer, we had a client. He was a veteran. He used a service animal for his PTSD. He received a job offer, and the employer rescinded the job offer as soon as he requested reasonable accommodations to bring his service animal into work. And he showed him all the documentation. He went through this whole intensive training for VAs and the service animal, and the service animal was custom for him, and it knew the commands, and knew exactly how to avoid his anxiety. But regardless, the employer rescinded the job offer. And what I did was I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter basically out to their attorney outlining the legal reasons for why we would have a legal lawsuit and they would lose. And I was able to negotiate with the attorney for a settlement, and that was a very attractive settlement for him. And he, you know, we basically try to think about, when you're in this situation, think about your goal. You know, is your goal to go back to that company or to start working for that company in this case, or is your goal to just walk away and be compensated for the emotional distress and, you know, everything that you had to suffer? And he really didn't want anything to do with this. So I'm good for him that we were able to get him a good settlement, not only for his lost income, but also money for emotional distress. And I have one more case I want to share with. This is also a housing case. This is interesting because now my client is a bilateral amputee. He has above knee, what they call the above knee amputation. He uses a wheelchair to ambulate, and he didn't have any grab bars in the toilet. And it was just a mess because he used to fall off the toilet, and it was, you know, it was humiliating for him because he would fall off using the toilet. And like I said, he's a double amputee. It was really hard for him to climb back on. And he needed these grab bars. He had an OT come in and assess the situation, and the VA paid for the grab bar, and the property manager refused to install them. He also wanted a balcony so he can have equal enjoyment to the balcony, just like all the other tenants who are not disabled should be able to use the balcony. They should be able to use the toilet properly. And the property manager really did not want to do any of this. And you know, when I talked to their attorney, it really came down to their stereotypes of people with disability, because they knew that he was in a wheelchair, and they thought by putting in this grab bar that somehow that he might fall and have an accident from the grab bar because that wasn't installed correctly, then there would be legal liability. And they thought that maybe if they put a ramp in the balcony and he got into an accident or went overboard or something, that again, they would have legal liability. And I explained to them, this wheelchair he's been using for so long now, he knows how to maneuver the wheelchair. It's You know, it was really a matter of breaking down stereotypes more than explaining the law. But I negotiated with the attorney to put both those items in. Also, we also asked for corner guards, so when he would go around the corner, he wouldn't damage his wheelchair or hurt himself. And I want to show you pictures of what. So this is the pre-installed grab bar. So this grab bar was basically sitting there idly, which is terrible because you couldn't even use it, but you had to see it. And you can see these are basically the instructions on how to put the grab bar in. It was sitting there for weeks before I walked in. And afterwards, this is the balcony, and you can see this is his balcony, but you can see his neighbor has got a nice chair there, and he can go outside anytime and enjoy the nice weather anytime he wants. This guy, you know, he went through this whole thing. He had 2 wheelchairs and he bounced back and forth, and you know, it was crazy. So anyway, the good news is that we were able to get everything that we needed and have the property manager agree that. You can see these are installed properly. And this is actually vertical and horizontal, and he can swing this back and forth when he needs it. So he has leverage getting on and off this toilet. This is the corner guards. They're actually a lot longer than we expected. They go all the way up and down the corner. So when he makes that turn, we actually got 6 for him. He was hurting himself and he was damaging his wheelchair. But this is the ramp. Now he can really enjoy his balcony like everybody else. If you look at these handlebars, there was some issues. We went back and forth. This took quite a while, but again, the property manager paid for this at the end of the day, and because it's their responsibility. And now he can access this, and everybody's happy. He gets to enjoy. We have these railings here and make them happy. We got this railing here and make sure that he doesn't go through and crash over for some reason. That's what they wanted. That was not a problem. It's a second layer of safety. So there was no issues with that. I did want to talk just a little bit about filing a complaint if you feel like you've been discriminated, but maybe I'll just wait, Kira, for you to jump in now. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way for us to end.
Okay.
Tell us about filing a complaint. So I want to share a little bit about my story of empowerment and also share a few of the cases that I've been working on in my short time with DLC so far. So I am totally blind. I was born blind, and the person who really taught me the most about empowerment was my mom. So she is herself a lawyer, though she just retired a couple of years ago. And she really had to advocate for me when I was in school to get all of the accommodations I needed to get instruction in Braille, in ability, and all of the things that a student who can't see needs to be able to participate in a public school where she's the only blind child in the school. And so I just remember from a very young age, her going to IEP meetings and just advocating for me tirelessly. And she would always have me go to these meetings starting from when I was about, I think, 6 or 7 years old, which is a little bit unusual for kids that young to go to those meetings. But she always said, I want you to be a part of this. You need to be empowered to make these decisions for yourself and to know how to request accommodations for yourself, because this is likely something that you're going to have to do for your entire life. And so I really learned how to do that from a young age. And my mom was a corporate lawyer in her career, but she ended up doing a lot of special education cases pro bono. So she advocated for others as well. And that really inspired me to want to do the same thing. It's like use these skills that we had to develop to be able to advocate for other people. So that's really how I became empowered. And I was lucky to have a mom who knew about disability law and who knew that the law could be used as a tool for empowerment. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that and don't have those resources. So that's why I went into a career in the law, to be able to advocate for others and help others advocate for themselves. So I want to share a few of the cases that I have worked on. So one of them was a case involving a woman who had a mental health disability, or has a mental health disability. And she was applying for Section 8 housing, which is basically subsidized housing. And she wanted to apply for this housing along with a live-in aide who would assist her with tasks of daily living, just basically everything in her daily life she needed some assistance with, taking medications and remembering to do that, because her mental health disability affected her pretty strongly. And because of the nature of her specific disability, this person needed to be someone that she trusted, that she knew very, very well. And this person that she had requested was her mother, and the housing authority denied this accommodation. They said that her mother could not be her live-in aide. They said that she could have a live-in aide, but it couldn't be her mother because her mother was a family member. And so my colleague and I were able to argue against that and say that there was nothing in the regulations preventing a family member from being a live-in caregiver. And in fact, that's better. All the research shows that it's better if it is a family member or somebody that the person is familiar with, to prevent exploitation and abuse. So that seemed to work. The hearing was canceled that they were going to have on this issue, but then they came back with another objection, saying that the fact that these two had already lived together and were splitting the rent payments, that meant that one of them couldn't be the live-in caregiver for the daughter. So at this point, I was working on this case by myself, and I went to another hearing on this issue to argue that just because they were splitting the rent payments, that didn't mean that there was any kind of like financial responsibility or financial incentive for this woman to want to be the live-in caregiver. And we were able to show that the only reason they were going to live together was because my client needed this accommodation, needed to have a live-in aide, and that person, because of her disability, it needed to be someone that she knew and trusted. And we were able to succeed in getting that accommodation. We ended up winning the hearing and found out a little bit before the holidays that this was successful. And my client said she was very happy, and that it was a kind of a holiday Christmas miracle almost, is how she framed it to me, which I was excited about. And I'd really gotten to know the whole family in the course of this case. And it was just really wonderful that this had worked out and that she's able to get the accommodation that she needs. And another case that I worked on a few of these kinds of cases, like the one I'm going to talk about. So it involves parking, which I've always joked that I'm kind of thankful not to drive in Boston because I don't want to deal with the parking situation. But for a person with a disability who drives or who is being driven by others, the parking situation is even more challenging if you need accessible parking or a designated accessible parking space. So for one of my clients, there used to be an accessible parking space in front of his condominium building, but then the condo owners converted that into a temporary parking space where, delivery drivers can come in and stay for 10 minutes and drop something off, and then they have to leave. So this left him with no place to park, and he's in his late 70s, and his wife also is disabled, has cancer. So they both really need this accessible parking to be able, they both use, or his wife uses a wheelchair. He doesn't himself, but he is physically disabled and has a harder time getting her out of the wheelchair, getting her out of the car, and needs to have enough room. And so there was nowhere for them to park. And the building assigned them a parking space to quote unquote solve this problem, but it was not an accessible parking space. And the building tried to say that because they were a condo association, they did not need to follow disability law. And so that's not true. A lot of these condo associations and other types of places, a lot of people feel that because they're private, they don't need to follow disability laws, but that's very, very rarely the case. And so that we did discover in our research that this condo building did fall under the Fair Housing Amendments Act. And so I wrote a letter to the condo board, and eventually we were able to get an accessible parking space designated for my client and his wife. So that was another successful case. And a case that I'm working on right now that it's kind of a work in progress is a case in which my client is not receiving accessible materials from his health insurance. So his health insurance is sending him materials in print and he reads Braille, he's blind. So that's something that we're working on right now. I wanted to introduce one of the cases that I'm working on that's not a housing case. This would be a Title II case because it involves a public entity. So I don't always do housing cases, but that has been kind of my main focus while I've been at DLC. So this has kind of been a newer one that I've been working on, and it's been really interesting. But that one is still in progress. So it's just so important for people to have their information, particularly health information, in a format that they can read instead of having to rely on others to read that material for them. And that's something that I know from personal experience. Is like, I'd really prefer to be able to read things by myself, particularly if they involve my healthcare. I mean, I can have a friend come and read them to me, but I feel that it is more of an invasion of privacy and not something that people without disabilities have to do. So yeah, that's really it for the cases that I had to talk with you all about. So I'm going to turn it back over to Riz now.
Yeah, so should we do questions now, or should I finish with the well, like how to file a claim?
I think you can finish with it and then we can start taking in questions.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
So you know, the when failure to grant reasonable accommodations is a form of discrimination. So you have that to file a claim if you feel like you asked for accommodations and you didn't get it. You have to do it within 300 days, sorry. And we recommend going to the state agency, which is the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. I have MCAD here, and this is the general number. And you know, if you're actually going to do this, I would call them and let them know. You don't need an attorney. They will help you file the claim. They will ask you a lot of questions. In the post-COVID era, what they do is you make an appointment with somebody, and the appointment can be like over a month long. So if you're actually going to file a claim, I would make sure you're very organized and not to rub up against that 300-day threshold. The EEOC, again, is the federal arm. They have a 180-day window, but once you file a claim, and because we're in Massachusetts, if you do it within 300 days, you're fine. And once you file a claim with the MCAD, you automatically file a claim with the EEOC. With that one claim, it triggers two. And very rarely, but I've had cases where the EEOC will come and take it out of the MCAD, and they'll look at their own claim independently. But usually they'll do whatever the MCAD says, and it's a long process. And I don't really want to get into the process because that's like another presentation. But I just wanted to make sure people had the resource to call if they felt like they needed to file a complaint where they were rubbing up against this 300-day. They already had an instance where they felt they were being discriminated because of their disability. And one other side note is if you file a claim and then your employer retaliates against you because you filed this claim, then you can file another claim called retaliation. And even if the first claim is you lose on that, you can still win on the second claim. So if the first claim, so you should just keep that in the back of your mind. So not that people don't retaliate, but it is illegal just because you file a claim. And I realized that we jumped into this without actually talking about the Disability Law Center and who we are. So we're actually doing this backwards, so I apologize. But me and Kira obviously both work for the Disability Law Center. We're attorneys. We are what they call a PNA, which stands for Protection Agency. There are 50 of us. We're in all the states or in the territories, in the Native American territories as well. That's a portion of it is congressionally funded. And our mission is to basically make sure that we protect and advocate for people with disability. And that includes identifying any kind of abuse or neglect in systems. So as from the name, you can tell that we advocate basically for people with disability. And we are a nonprofit, and we don't charge. And if you feel like there's an issue because you have a disability, whether it's a housing issue or whether it's an employment issue or there's some kind of neglect going on, that you can call our number. We have an intake team that will look at it and assess it. And if we can't help you, we will definitely point you in the right direction. A lot of our cases are not like like the cases that I discussed. A lot of the cases are actually what we call self-advocacy. And I was going to talk about one of those if we have time, but basically we point people in the right direction, and we explain to them how to file claims and how to do things themselves. But anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'm kind of look forward to your questions.
Sure. Thank you, Riz and Kira, for your experience in advancing our knowledge on the DLC, as well as all the different cases that you've dealt with. Now, I think we can ask our audience to put in their questions. The ones who joined virtually, you can type in your questions in the chat box, and I could read it out loud. And the ones that are present here, you can ask the questions out loud. So we can start taking our questions in. So I had one question, Riz. So like you showed us the pictures of the clients who come to you and the kind of different equipments that you design for them. So,
No, we don't design any equipments.
Okay, so how does it work? Like they approach you, and how does the workflow work? Like,
We advise them of their rights. Okay, so in all those cases, we got them in touch with vendors. They basically got the vendors. We didn't design any of that. They in the case with the person who had the ramp, he was working with a OT from the VA, Department of Office Association, and the OT was in touch with several vendors that makes ramps. He was also in touch with several vendors that make those handlebars for the grab bars for the bathroom. In the case where we had the roll and shower, the property manager already had vendors that she worked with, and she looked into the existing relationships. So we don't design, we're not engineers, we don't design any of that stuff. But we advise them of their rights, which is they are entitled to these ramps and these grab bars, and it is up to the property managers at the property manager's expense.
Okay, that answers my question. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of our audience, Nikhil, has a question for you. How much is enough information to document that a student has a disability in a university or a college?
Yeah, that's a good question. Kira, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think it often depends on the disability, sadly. I mean, I don't think that that's how it should be, but unfortunately, that tends to be the case. If it's a disability that is more readily apparent, often there is not as much documentation that needs to be provided. But if it's a what they call an invisible disability, you might need to provide more documentation from your doctor. Basically, it's whatever is necessary to determine for the person to determine that you have a disability and the connection between the disability that you have and the accommodation that you're requesting. So it really depends on the situation, but usually letters from your doctor should be sufficient. I mean, if there can be cases when they are asking for way too much information, and that can certainly happen, but often people are surprised by the amount of information they do have to provide. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Riz, but
Yeah, you hit it right in the head. I think, really it depends on the disability. But as a general rule, you will definitely need what we call medical support, which is a note from your doctor, or therapist or whatever, whoever the professional is. So
yeah.
when you were talking about invisible disabilities, I have one of those invisible disabilities. So you don't know I have ADHD, you don't know I have dyslexia. So how do you know I'm not just, asking for more time? Well, that's why you need a professional to diagnose me and make sure that, this is my situation. So, the only other thing I would say about this is we don't recommend, once you give your medical support, we don't recommend that you allow the personnel, it's usually the human resource personnel, to call your doctor, because that's basically a fishing expedition. Whatever questions they have, they should just put it in writing to your doctor and let them answer it. We have seen cases where, they try to talk to the doctors and try to use some of the information from the doctors against our clients. So I would really recommend not to get on the phone calls have the doctors talk to the HR people, because the doctors are not attorneys and they may say something that's not completely helpful for your case. I mean, basically what they should just say is, this is your disability. As a professional, you've been diagnosed with this disability, and then explain what would be helpful as an accommodation to overcome whatever it is, functions that they need help with, and they should put that recommendation in. And it should be that simple. And then let the employer or whoever it is, the school, come back and request for more documentation if that's not enough. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
The,
A question? Okay.
so hi Riz, so I have one question. So like you talked about the accommodations for the disabled people, like what kind of actions are required to reasonably accommodate applicants and employees in the workspace? So
Well, I think every place will have a contact person to ask for accommodations. So if you're an employer, I would ask your supervisor, and then your supervisor will probably refer you to human resources. We always request accommodations in writing. That way there's a record. This is exactly what I asked for. This is exactly how you responded. And once you ask for accommodations, that's what we call, it triggers a responsibility from the employer to have what we call an interactive dialogue. And an interactive dialogue is exactly what it sounds like. It's interactive. It's self-explanatory. It's not like, can I have this? No, you can't have it. Goodbye. That's not interactive. So once you request an accommodation, this will trigger their affirmative responsibility to have that interactive dialogue, that they can come back and ask you more questions. They can ask you more questions about your disability, and they can also come back with what they call alternative accommodations. They don't have to give you that specific accommodation, as long as it meets the whatever disability you may have and whatever it is you're trying to do. And just remember, there has to be some kind of nexus, some kind of connection between the disability and what it is that you're requesting. Okay, so just remember that. So, and it just, they may have fulfilled their legal responsibilities or may not by responding with that alternative accommodation. That might be what we call effective or not. I don't want to get to, but so you have to just be flexible and see if it works for you. If it doesn't work, obviously don't accept the alternative accommodation. But usually there's a writing process. And in that writing process, it could be easy as just sending a quick email to somebody, and then they will send you forms to fill out, which is the normal process. And one of the forms will be a note from your doctor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I hope that answered your question.
I was just circling back to the accessible equipments that I know that you don't engineer or you just suggest them, but are there some specific laws or guidelines that every bedroom, public place, or like a garden or something like that should have a railing that's like 3 feet tall, 8 feet tall, whatever, or something like that? So
There are these architectural laws. I don't remember the exact law, architectural, I don't know, Kira, you remember?
I think they're the Architectural Access Board regulations. Yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
That.
So like one example would be like number of like handicap spots in a parking lot. Number of handicap, number of handicap hotel rooms in a hotel. So there has to be a particular ratio. So it might fall, what you're asking for, I don't know what you're looking for specifically, but may fall under that. Kira, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
No, I think that clears up the question, because I wasn't sure that if there are any rules or guidelines, because like each person's accessibility needs might be different, but at the same time there should be some common standard ground that, okay, like this is the minimum. If you need anything more than this based on your needs, it will be added to it. But something, I wasn't just sure if that exists or it doesn't.
Yeah, and because everybody's needs are different, just because you have a mobility difference doesn't mean that everybody has the same needs, to your point. And that's why the accommodations that you request will also be different. So two people with the same disability can actually ask for different accommodations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just and it's a kind of open-ended question. So I'm not too sure where to go with it, but there are minimums under the law that when you make a building that you're supposed to do certain things.
Just a quick follow-up question. Do you know any companies or some organizations that like are specially inclined to designing accessible equipments only, or like something that can convert any equipment into an accessible equipment or something like that?
Can you give me a little bit more specific example?
Oh, let's say
What?
Prosthetic arm, something like that.
no, maybe more like let's say there is a ramp, and you want to like build something besides the ramp so that you can climb up the ramp properly.
Like a
a stairs or something. Stairs, not really a ramp, a stairs. If there's a stairs and now you want to convert the stairs into a ramp. So is there any specific company that like manufactures something like that?
There's a lot of companies. We don't recommend any specific companies, to be honest with you. Kira, I don't know if you want to discuss
I
that.
don't know. I'm sure the names of the companies, but I know there are some.
So
Okay,
it's very easy to track them down and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
And what's going to happen is the person who owns that stairway, usually the landlord, will probably have relationships with certain vendors who may not do that. And those are the people that are going to go to first.
thank you, Liz.
Sure.
So we have one question in the chat box by Harshal. And he says, hi there, great work, guys. It's quite commendable to actually hear people that are standing up for those in need and providing necessary solutions to their problems. However, do you think that necessary amends need to be made to the law system in the country to help those in needs, considering that people are always neglecting those in need or either finding loopholes to avoid helping them? Would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this.
So is the question that we need more stringent laws? Is that the
I
question?
guess, yeah.
Okay. It is like a catch-22, like you say, the more stringent you make it, the more doesn't mean that people are gonna obey them, right? Just because you can pass any law. So there has to be some kind of carrot and stick kind of thing. And the only stick here is where, especially when it comes to public accommodations law, is by people with disabilities standing up for their rights and taking lawsuits and when people deny them the rights and take illegal actions against them, that they take them to court. I mean, because that is really the stick that you have. Unfortunately, like Kira was saying, by Title III, which is public accommodations, even if you take them to court and win under the ADA, you don't actually get any money back. You may make them change certain things and have them make training, but it's good that we live in Massachusetts, because our state law will penalize them and you can be compensated for that. But I agree, just because people make laws doesn't mean that other people are going to follow them. But it comes, when you think about certain changes that happen. I was listening to a public accommodation training a while ago, and people like Rosa Parks or there are a lot of lawsuits that happen, and that's why there are certain things that we take for granted now, and it's because people stood up for their rights.
I hope that answers your question, Harshal. And I think we can have one final question I guess. And Riz, I had one more question for you. Since you come across a lot of discrimination that happens with disabled people, so do you think it's always unintentional, or are you usually surprised by the way people are actually very insensitive towards others?
I'm still surprised of the stories we hear.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Kira, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It can be very shocking. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is unintentional. Sometimes people just don't know that they need to do something.
Yeah.
But usually for a person to get to the point where they need to call us, they've usually tried to communicate with the person and they're saying, no, I won't do this. And so it does cross into the territory of being intentional and just kind of insensitive, and just thinking that I think that there's a misconception that there are so few people with disabilities that it doesn't really matter and it's just one person, and why do I need to do all this for one person when really there are so many people with disabilities, and we need to make the world more accessible.
Okay. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, it's not a happy answer, but
Yeah. So is there anything else, Riz or Kira, that you want to share before we end the event?
Nope. Thanks for having us. Thank you, Valerie, for being our ASL interpreter.
yes, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And
Thank
great
you.
questions.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for coming. It was an honor to have Mr. Huda and Kira come here and support us in our allied events. Riz, thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule and sharing your incredible journey at the Disability Law Center. If you want to hear more about his work and how he deals with his clients, I can share his social media details on our Allied and Instagram official page. I'm sure he'd love to give you more information and how you can support and keep the good work going. And just a quick update, our next Allied event will be taking place on the 17th of February. It's around a very interesting topic. It's about eating disorder awareness. Rachel Rogers will be advancing our knowledge on this topic. It'll be in the same room from 3:30 to 4:30 in the same building. We're super excited to share with you what we have lined up. So yes, we're coming to the end of this event. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and participating in this meaningful conversations. And a final special thanks to our guests, Mr. Rizwan Al Huda and Kira Sweeney, for their informative session. And of course, our directors, Dr. Mona Minkara and Dr. Sandra, for being the backbone of Allied, and all my colleagues for being such a good support system. And thank you, Valerie, for assisting us today. Above all, without our wonderful community, these events would only go so far. So thank you, everyone. See you on February 17th. Same place, same time. Yes.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Remember, the conversation does not end here. Let's carry the knowledge and inspiration we've gained today forward into our lives, our communities, and our work. Together, we can create a world that is more inclusive, more compassionate, and more accepting for everyone, regardless of their abilities. Stay connected by subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Allied Project. Also follow us on our social media allied_noi. We have many more enlightening events and discussions lined up, and we'd love to have you subscribe to our newsletters by contacting us on allied@northeastern.edu. Thank you once again for your participation and support. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and let's continue working towards a more inclusive world. Goodbye, and see you again.